Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. We start from India, where 6 people have been killed in the violent protests in northeastern Assam state over a controversial citizenship law. The protesters see the law as a part of PM Modi's Hindu nationalist agenda to marginalize the country's 200 million Muslims. Authorities said 3 people succumbed to their wounds after being shot by police in Assam. Another person died when his shop was set on fire, and one was beaten to death during a protest. The 6th victim was tanker driver who was burnt to death after his vehicle was torched. Officials said 6 flights from Guwahati airport were cancelled. Train services were also suspended after violence in eastern West Bengal state. In Yemen, 9 Houthi rebels have been killed in clashes with the government forces in the northern Marib province. A spokesman for the Yemeni joint forces said 17 rebels were injured in the attack on Ad-Durya Himi district. Yemen has been beset by chaos since 2014, when Houthi rebels overran much of the country, including the capital. The Saudi-led coalition then launched an offensive in 2015 aimed at rolling back Houthi territorial gains. Iran says it will not restore diplomatic ties with the United States. The spokesperson for Iran's Supreme and National Security Council said the recent prisoner swap doesn't signal the start of new talks. Kayvan Khosravi said the prisoner swap was carried out without any negotiations with Washington. The spokesperson said the exchange was solely down to Tehran's humanitarian approach. He clarified the move shouldn't be viewed as an attempt to start a new dialogue, but was a bid to resolve an unwanted situation involving innocent people. Iran and the US carried out a prisoner exchange last Saturday. In a related development, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin has said Washington's campaign of exerting maximum pressure on Tehran is working. At the Doha Forum in Qatar, Mnuchin said U.S. pressure has drastically reduced Iran's ability to sponsor militants abroad. He said Washington would end all embargoes on Iran if it fulfills the necessary conditions. He added sanctions often work as an alternative to open military conflicts. Talking about Saudi Arabia, he said U.S. troops are stationed in the kingdom on a defensive basis. Mnuchin said Trump administration is not weaponizing the dollar through its trade restricting policies with other countries. The Turkish Navy has forced out an Israeli ship in Cypriot waters as tensions continue over natural resource exploration in the region. The Israeli ship was conducting research in Cyprus's territorial waters in coordination with the Cypriot officials. Turkey and Libya signed a deal in November to map out maritime boundary in the east of the Mediterranean Sea. Last week, Greece lodged a complaint to the United Nations over the deal, claiming it threatened regional stability. Turkey says it would retaliate against any U.S. sanctions over its purchase of Russian missile defense system. Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said Ankara would not cancel its S-400 deal with Moscow. Çavuşoğlu said the arrangement with Moscow was vital for Ankara as the country desperately needed an air defense system. He said sanctions and threatening language would not work. Earlier this week, U.S. senators backed legislation to impose sanctions on Turkey over its missile deal and its recent military operation in northern Syria. North Korea's military has said the U.S. must refrain from provoking Pyongyang if it wants to see a peaceful new year. Chief of the General Staff Park Jong-cheon said the army was fully prepared to carry out any decision of the top leadership. The statement came hours after North Korea conducted a second test at the Sohae satellite launch site. Park said the recent tests are aimed at subduing nuclear threats from Washington. Earlier, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said Washington is trying hard to restart the talks. North Korea has ramped the pressure on the U.S. to come up with a solution to their stalled negotiations before the end of the year. U.S. Special Envoy for North Korea Stephen Biegun has arrived in South Korea on a 3-day visit. This follows Pyongyang's claim of conducting a crucial test at the Sohae satellite launch site. Biegun will meet South Korean President Moon Jae-in tomorrow amid North Korea's increasing pressure on the U.S. to make concessions to revive denuclearization talks. The US diplomat will head to Tokyo to consult with his Japanese counterpart after his meeting with President Moon. Earlier, Biden said the US's stance has not changed regarding the denuclearization of North Korea. Pyongyang has repeatedly warned the US of grave consequences amid the approaching year-end deadline. US Chief Negotiator James DeHart has arrived in Seoul to conduct a fresh round of defense cost-sharing talks with South Korea. DeHart is set to meet his South Korean counterpart Jong On-bo for the fifth round of negotiations on Tuesday and Wednesday. Lengthy consultations are expected over the cost of stationing American troops in South Korea. Washington and Seoul have been striving to conclude the deal by the end of this year when the current one-year accord expires. Washington has demanded a drastic increase in Seoul's payments to cover expenses related to the two allies' combined military exercises. Pakistan's Prime Minister will visit Bahrain tomorrow as part of his initiative to promote peace in the Gulf. Khan will meet Bahrain's King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa and Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa. The Premier will attend the National Day of Bahrain as the guest of honor. PM Khan will also receive Manama's highest civil award, the King Hamad Order of Renaissance. This is Prime Minister Khan's first visit to Bahrain since assuming office in August 2018. A child has died while 14 others have been injured in a 6.8 magnitude earthquake near the Philippine city of Davao. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center said there was no tsunami threat from the quake. U.S. Geological Survey said the quake was centered 61 kilometers southwest of Davao on the island of Mindanao. Matano's mayor, Vincent Fernandez, said a 6-year-old girl died after a wall collapsed on her. Fernandez said the extent of the damage was unclear. Rescue services were ongoing. Roads and buildings are damaged while power transmission systems have also been affected. More stories to follow right after a short break. Welcome back. Tensions between the French government and the unions opposed to pension reforms have mounted as transport strike entered its 11th day. Strike organizers have announced a massive protest on Tuesday. Unions plan to repeat 1995's 3-week-long public transport strike that forced the government to back down from pension reform. France's CFDT union has opposed transport strikes over the Christmas period and called for new measures in January. In contrast, the hardline CGT union said there would be no Christmas break unless the government drops the whole pension reform plan. The pension plan unveiled by Prime Minister Edouard Philippe has proposed a single points-based pension system. Queen Elizabeth will set out Prime Minister Boris Johnson's legislative agenda on December the 18th, following his election victory. The Prime Minister's office said the agenda will include a pledge to bring the Brexit bill back to the Parliament before Christmas. The statement said the Queen will also announce the restoration of Northern Ireland's government after nearly 3 years' hiatus. The Queen's speech in the House of Lords is used to detail all the bills the government plans to enact over the coming year. Thursday's speech to the Parliament will be monarch's second in as many months. The Queen delivered one on 14th of October, shortly before the polls, following a deadlock over the government's Brexit plans. Earlier, Johnson said his top priority is to finally secure Brexit after leading Tories to their biggest win in general elections since 1987. And the UK Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn has apologised over the party's defeat in Thursday's elections. Labour suffered its worst election result since 1935 and saw its vote share fall by 8 points. In an article, Corbyn expressed regret to his supporters, calling it a shock for everyone who wanted real change in the country. Corbyn said he takes responsibility for the result and will remove himself from the leadership of the Labour Party soon. Meanwhile, in an interview, Labour's finance policy chief John McDonnell said he owns this disaster. He said the new Labour leadership will be in place early next year. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has said Scotland cannot be imprisoned in the United Kingdom against its will by London. In a televised interview, Sturgeon said London would be mistaken to reject a referendum to try and put the matter to rest. The Scottish National Party leader wants to hold a new referendum on independence next year under the mandate of the SNP's electoral success. The Scottish National Party won 48 of Scotland's 59 seats in the UK Parliament. In Italy, over 50,000 people have been evacuated from southern Brindisi city as experts work to defuse a World War II bomb. Authorities said it is the biggest peacetime evacuation in Italy. More than 60% of the city's residents have been forced to vacate a red zone. The city's airport, train station, 2 hospitals and a prison were also shut down. The 1-meter-long British bomb carrying 40 kilograms of dynamite is believed to have been dropped on the city in 1941. The bomb was found last month during refurbishment at a cinema theater. 5 bodies have been unearthed from a mass grave at a farm outside Mexico's western Guadalajara city. The local prosecutor's office said 13 bodies have been identified and their remains are being handed over to their families. The authorities said the site was discovered just over 3 weeks ago in Jalisco, a state hard hit by violence linked to organized crime. Officials said the investigation to identify the remaining victims and their cause of death will continue. A mass grave with 34 bodies was discovered in Guadalajara in September, while another was found in May with the remains of 30 people. The prosecutor's office said nearly 2,500 murders have been reported between January and November. Bolivia's interim president Janine Áñez says former President Evo Morales will be arrested when he returns to the country. The announcement comes 3 days after Morales was granted refugee status in Argentina. Interim leader Áñez said that an arrest warrant for Morales will be issued in the coming days.
Nevertheless, if he wants to return to Bolivia, he knows he has to give answers to the country and he has accounts pending with the justice system. So, he will have to face the consequences. Very likely, in the coming days, the arrest order will be issued because we have already filed the complaint.
Lows on the highs of the business world now. China has suspended tariffs planned to be implemented on some U.S. goods today. Beijing State Council's Custom Tariff Commission announced the annulment on its website. The decision follows a Phase 1 trade deal between Beijing and Washington on Friday. It reduces some U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods in exchange for higher purchases of American agricultural products. China's retaliatory tariffs were meant to target goods ranging from corn and wheat to the U.S.-made vehicles and automotive parts. Washington said Beijing has agreed to import U.S. goods and services worth $200 billion over the next 2 years. It added that the U.S. would still impose 25% tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods. Pakistan has opened its Gwadar port for exports as a vessel loaded with 3 containers of seafood left for Far Eastern ports. Advisor to Prime Minister for Trade and Industries Abdul Razak Dawood said Gwadar would reduce the burden on Karachi's Bin Qasim port. Dawood said the first vessel carried 3 containers worth $50,000 each. The port is a deep sea port on the Arabian Sea in Balochistan. It is an important part of China-Pakistan economic corridor and is a key link in Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay with us. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.news.